Good afternoon, and welcome to the 13th Annual Theodore M. Hesburgh Award and Frank Cahill Lecture, both jointly sponsored by the Center for Ethics and Religious Values in Business and the Institute for Ethical Business Worldwide. I'm Professor Pat Murphy and will be the MC for this important event, and my role will be to introduce a few people to you and keep the proceedings on schedule. Our order of events this afternoon is that we'll begin with a few introductions, then we'll have the Cahill lecture, starting with a background bio on Frank Cahill, with whom we honor this lecture, then proceed to the MBA students who will be the panelists in the Cahill lecture, and followed by the Hesburgh Award that will be given to 3M Corporation. First, I'd like to introduce Frank Cahill's son, Mike Cahill, sitting here, Notre Dame alumnus and CEO of Tower Financial Corporation, Fort Wayne. And I'm sorry that your mom, Marty, can't be with us today, but let her know that she's definitely missed. So Mike is here representing the Cahill family, which is great. Second, Father Hesburgh, who will be more formally introduced later, President Emeritus of Notre Dame, in whose honor we give the Hesburgh Award. And third, I'd like to welcome George Buckley, Sir George Buckley in the front row, Chairman of 3M Corporation, who's here to accept the award on behalf of the company. Now I'd like to give you just a little background on the Frank Cahill Business Ethics Lecture. It was established after Frank's untimely death from cancer at the age of 59. He grew up in Syracuse, New York, like you, Father Ted, right? Syracuse, New York, and always dreamed of attending Notre Dame. His graduation was the beginning of an abiding connection between the Cahill family and the university. This connection now includes Mike, who you just met, and his oldest grandson, Sean, who's a class of 2006 alum. After earning his BS in Commerce, Frank enjoyed a very successful career as an executive, and he retired as an officer of Roadway Express. Integrity, character, and ethics were cornerstones of Frank's life and career throughout his nearly 40 years in business. Frank experienced firsthand the challenges and commitment to ethical business practices that can be introduced with the pursuit of both personal and professional success. Frank recognized a real need to introduce young professionals to some of the ethical considerations they'll face in the business world, and our four panelists are going to do that in just a few minutes. The Frank Cahill Business Ethics Lecture focuses on principles of integrity and ethical behavior in the business environment, provides Notre Dame community with a lasting reminder of Frank's exemplary qualities, and we're pleased to honor him today. Our panelists today are MBA students who are going to share with us a few ethical issues that they faced early in their career, and we are not going to, or I'm not going to announce their former employers, because I think they're going to tell a few stories about their former employers, and as we always say, you never know who's in a Notre Dame audience, right? So the panelists, in order of alphabetical, is on the far end, Andrew Drew Bedward, who's a first-year MBA student. He's originally from New Jersey, but came to us here at Notre Dame from Chicago. His undergraduate degree is in finance from Howard University, and he's worked in some of the leading financial firms in that industry. Camille Chan is a native of Vancouver, Canada, and is a one-year MBA student. Her bachelor's degree is from the University of San Francisco, with majors in both marketing and finance. Prior to enrolling in the MBA program, Camille worked in the hospitality industry for several years. Natalie Gamino grew up in Northwest Indiana and attended Notre Dame for her undergraduate degree, majoring in marketing and Spanish. And like Camille, she's in the one-year program. Between the time of her graduation and coming back for the MBA, Natalie worked in the Chicago area in human resources for a large firm. And Michael Mullen graduated from Carnegie Mellon University with a major in accounting. He's a native of the Pittsburgh area. His work in accounting was in the auditing area. Mike is a first-year MBA and will be interning in the finance department of Sears this summer. So he doesn't have any stories yet about Sears, but hopefully there won't be too many. So we can, if you guys have agreed, who wants to go first? Drew?
Yeah, we'll
okay.
go in order. So as Professor Murphy mentioned, I've been in the financial services industry my entire career. Most recently, I was with a large wealth management firm, a name that you guys are all familiar with.
Drew, move the mic a little closer.
Is this better?
Yes.
A firm that you guys are all familiar with, but I won't say the name. And essentially, compensation is basically tied on the investment recommendations you make to your clients. We create proprietary products that we sell to the end investor. Many times the end investor are large portfolio managers. And so essentially in wealth management, each employee is his or her own island. You're not essentially a part of a team, but there are times when you have a certain expertise in a certain discipline. In this particular situation, I had an expertise in just the field of investments. My partner had an expertise in the field of insurance. And so it turned out that the client needed expertise in investments. And so the normal process is to meet with the client and do your due diligence and then come back with a formal recommendation based on his or her needs. And it turned out that this particular client was an elderly woman who just inherited a large amount of proceeds from her husband's passing. She was oblivious to the world of finance. She didn't have any loved ones or anyone to kind of give her guidance on the appropriate recommendations. So my partner, who requested my help, felt that he could kind of take advantage of her lack of knowledge or lack of expertise. And so he decided, based on what he thought her needs were, to recommend something that was completely inappropriate, completely irrelevant, and unsuitable for her needs at the time. And when we were going over recommendations, it was a very expensive product, and as I mentioned, it wasn't appropriate, and I expressed my concerns with his recommendation. And so we actually got into a bit of not an altercation, not physical, but there was a big disagreement. And at that point, I felt it was appropriate to kind of escalate the situation. We brought it to the managing partner of the firm, and it turned out that, because my partner's recommendation was going to generate more revenues for the firm, and obviously that it's in the managing partner's best interest to generate revenues for the firm, he went with his recommendation. And so at that point, I took myself out of the equation. I was no longer a part of the deal, and fortunately, the client ended up going with another firm that recommended something that was more suitable. So it worked out in everyone's favor. It's interesting, a few years later, that same advisor that I was working with actually had a few formal complaints filed against them for recommending unsuitable products. And thankfully, I wasn't a part of any of those allegations. And so we'll move on.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Natalie Gamino, and as Professor Murphy mentioned, I'm a current 1 year, and I previously worked in the human resources field. I actually graduated from Notre Dame, so I got my business degree from here. And I will say that after reflection, when Professor asked me to do this, I will say that Notre Dame prepared me in my undergrad to, at the minimum, be aware and be able to identify when something doesn't feel right when you're working in the workforce. And so I have two examples of that I wanted to share with you today. So working in HR, I think you can call human resources the laundry room of an organization because that's where all the dirty laundry goes. So I wanted to share with you two personal stories. The first one being shortly after I started working, I went into a formal development program that many of you might be going into, something similar. And after my program ended, I was just working in HR in a department, and a colleague of mine, a peer colleague of mine, we would have lunch all the time, and she worked in recruiting, and she came up to me, and we had lunch one day, and she was talking about something she wasn't very comfortable with, and that was the fact that we were reporting diversity numbers from our university program that we recruited undergrads like you at Notre Dame. She was reporting diversity numbers for our head of HR. And the number she had for both interns and full-time employees seemed a little bit high. So she asked for backup data and took a look, and it turned out, or it appeared that we were actually double counting numbers and basically padding the numbers so that our women and minority number for the total class looked pretty high. Whether it was done intentionally or not, she wasn't sure, but she didn't feel comfortable going to her supervisor to talk to her. So she asked my thoughts and opinions, and we started talking about it. And I offered to take that information anonymously to someone I felt comfortable with in our department who had previously worked in recruiting, to at least flag it and see if she could look into it. She agreed to that, and that's what happened, and I did, and I took it and flagged it and said, I don't want to make a big deal about it, but if we could just look into it, that would be great. And this was a person I went to that I trusted, and she was able to look into it, and we actually had the numbers changed before they went to our head of HR. And that just results in better business, because if we have low diversity numbers and we're trying to make them higher, we can't really come up with a great action plan to recruit better talent and diverse talent into our organization. That's one example. The second happened around performance management time. And I worked at this company during the economic downturn, and while we did great on the street and we reported great numbers and had a great 4 quarters, our internal, for our bonuses, our internal guidance was that we were going to give about 1% to 2% for our bonus pool for our colleagues, which is practically nothing if you're not making a lot of money in the firm. I had access to the data, the bonus data, for all of our employees in my division, as well as the CEO of my division and her executive team. I noticed that the numbers, there was quite a difference in what we were paying, and we were actually paying about 85 to 90% of bonus for our executives, which ended up being, to give a rough figure, it was anywhere from $500,000 to a little over $1 million in bonus. While our regular colleagues who had worked hard for a great year were getting 1% to 2%, if they, on a 1 to 5 scale, if they were rated a 4 or a 5. So I went to my manager, who again I had a really great relationship with, so we were able to talk about these things, and I just brought it up. And I didn't bring it up to gripe, I just made the comment, but we started talking about it, and she asked, well, what do you think we can do about it? And so we just started brainstorming, and in that meeting, she asked me to go back and to model out what it would look like if we were to take some of that money and spread it across our I'll call Joe Schmo employee. And so we did that, and we figured that we could reach a bunch more people if we could allocate $500,000 of that to others. And we took that and came up with a story and went to our CEO, and she actually agreed that if executives were okay with giving a portion of their bonus, that it could then be spread out and we could use that. And they had executives had the option to do that, and some of them did and some of them didn't, but as a result of just having the conversation, we were able to allocate more money to more people who deserved it because they had worked really hard. So that's my second example, and I guess the only advice I would give is when something doesn't feel right, the thing that really gets you to action is really to just start talking about it with people you're comfortable with your peers to start with, or coworkers, and brainstorm with them on what you can do. But I think something will naturally happen if you at least take that first action and have a discussion about it. Thank you. Hello?
Hello. Hi, I'm Camille. As Professor Murphy mentioned, I was previously in the hospitality industry. I actually worked in sales, and I lived in Vancouver and worked during the 2010 Winter Olympics, and my ethical situation came up during the Olympics. Basically what happened was our hotel was fully booked during the Olympics. We had no space for extra people. However, the 2 weeks preceding the Olympics were the Paralympics, and unfortunately those aren't as popular as the Olympics, and we didn't have very high occupancy rates. I would say our hotel was maybe 5% booked at that time. So being in the sales department, it's my job to bring in big groups of people. I got a call a few weeks before the Paralympics, and essentially the lady was asking me for a substantial amount of rooms, and I realized that if I secured this piece of business, it would bring in a good amount of revenue for the hotel. So what the lady did was she sent me her requirements. It seemed like her group could fit into our hotel. I sent her the contract, and she was really happy because she was booking these rooms at the last minute, and not a lot of hotels in Vancouver had space. So she signed the contract, I secured the deposit, went along with regular business procedures, and she eventually sent me her rooming list, which outlined how many rooms she needed and what kind of rooms she needed. So basically in the hotel industry, she could specify if she needed 2 beds or 1 king bed, a queen bed. When she sent me this list, I noticed that she needed a lot of handicap accessible rooms. And unfortunately, since I worked in a boutique hotel, it was a smaller hotel, we only had 1 room that was handicap accessible. Now keep in mind, the contract was already signed. Technically, there was no way out of it. She either had to pay the hotel and find another hotel to accommodate for these people, or she had to just stay with our hotel, pay the fees that was in the contract, and just, deal with it, I guess you could say. So after finding out that we couldn't meet the requirements and essentially the product that I had sold her wasn't what she was looking for, I grappled with it for a while. It was hard for me to go to my boss and even ask her what I should do. I eventually did, of course, just because I felt like I couldn't handle the situation on my own. And to make a long story short, I had worked extra hard with a meeting planner who had booked the rooms to figure out what kind of rooms she really needed for her guests and what kind of disabilities we needed to accommodate during their stay. And at the end of the day, luckily, I was able to secure extra rooms, extra beds, and accessible, what do you call them? Special accessible chairs for showers to accommodate her group. And luckily I didn't lose the business, and we were able to secure that substantial amount of revenue. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Mullen. As Professor Murphy mentioned, I worked in public accounting before coming to Notre Dame for my MBA. And when Professor Murphy asked me to speak before you today about ethical conflicts or ethical situations I've been involved in, a couple came to my mind, but probably the one that stuck out the most was on my very first audit job, actually. And I remember it well because it was your first audit. I was really unsure of myself, didn't really know what I was doing. I was just hoping that, nothing would be really uncovered. There wouldn't be a big problem in one of my sections that I was responsible for, but it didn't turn out that way. But while I was at that audit, I was doing fixed asset testing, and so I was looking at the capital additions the company had made during the year, and one invoice had jumped out to me. It was about $15,000 or $20,000, which was large for them. They didn't have a lot of additions that year. The economy wasn't doing too well. And so I selected that invoice to test, talked to the senior accountant, and got the actual invoice for the amount. And it turned out to be a very expensive watch that the owner's daughter had purchased in New York. Apparently she had pretty expensive tastes. So, my immediate thought was, this isn't a business asset. It shouldn't be capitalized. It should be expensed. And so I, brought this up to the senior accountant, and she's like, talk to the controller. And, it was his call. So I go in the controller's office, and not very looking forward to this. He's older guy, maybe in his 50s, a lot of experience, not the most receptive guy to auditors, especially brand new ones. And so I, explained the situation, what I tested, my assessment of it. And, he says, well, yeah, you're right, but the owner wanted me to put it through that way. It's not a very material amount, let's just leave it. I don't want to change things at this point. And it wasn't it was immaterial for our purposes. It wouldn't have had a material effect on their financials, but it was still wrong to do. But I remember leaving the office, and it was tough for me as a new staff, challenging someone with 30-plus years experience and, telling him that it should be done this way. So I kind of sat on it for a little while, and I knew I could easily bury the issue, that no one would know, that I'd just check off that it was properly capitalized. And again, it wasn't material enough that would really raise a red flag. And I kind of knew that I didn't want to do anything that jeopardized the firm's relationship with the client, that controller had a long-standing relationship with our partner on the job, and they went to sporting events together. And so I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that relationship. But on the other hand, I didn't want to really start down the path of, being too afraid to do the right thing, especially because this was my first audit, and I felt it would just be a slippery slope. So I sat on it for a few days, and I remember just thinking to myself, I have to do the right thing here and report this. So I remember requesting a one-on-one meeting with my manager when he came out to the field a couple days later and explained the situation to him. And, he said, he agreed with my assessment that it was incorrect, and he said, yes, it's immaterial, but we have to do something about it. So ultimately, he brought it up to the partner, and the partner discussed it with the controller, and an adjustment was made for it. But looking back, I was really glad I made the right move. I really think I worked actually for that client next 3 years, the last year being the senior on the job, and I really think the controller respected me for doing the right thing and reporting it and not bearing the issue. And I'm not saying we had a perfect working relationship. We had subsequent disagreements on subsequent audits, but I really think he respected me for making the right move. And another conflict, more general conflict I wanted to mention that I encountered in public accounting was also when it came to billing clients. There's a lot of pressure. Some partners, especially one partner in the firm, would put a lot of pressure on us to watch how much we billed clients because usually, clients for audits are billed a fixed fee, $80 or $100,000 for an audit. But meanwhile, you're billing your hours to the client, and as a staff, you're billing, $130, $150 an hour to the client, and up from there. Unfortunately, you don't get paid quite that much per hour. But and ultimately, partners want to show that we received $100,000 for this job, and we only billed $80,000 or so in it. So we realized a good profit. So there was pressure in that regard, and I remember I'm not going to sit up here and claim I was perfect in regards to billing. I did succumb to some pressure in that, especially early in my career, when you're not as efficient, when you're unsure of what you're doing. I tried to cut back on my hours a little bit, but as I went on, I became more confident in my work, and I always knew that, if something came up, I had to work to back it up, that, yeah, this took longer, we had to do this extra test, or this risk popped up. So I was always able to adapt, and I knew I had, my work supporting the hours I was billing. But overall, I'd say, the main ethical conflicts I faced in my career were early, like the first year in my career in public accounting, that when you're really unsure yourself, when you're dealing with clients that have a lot more experience than you, when pretty much everybody in your company is an authority figure, it can be quite challenging, and that's why you need that strong ethical foundation to really get on the right path in terms of dealing with ethical conflicts.
Thank you. Those were some excellent illustrations. We have time for a few questions here, so why don't we have a student or two ask one of our panel members to either expound upon something they talked about or some issue you'd like a little more guidance on. Well, maybe I'll start and then we'll have Drew, the financial services industry has kind of been, in general, under some criticism in recent years for just kind of how they do business. And what was your, that was an excellent example you gave of a certain situation you were confronted with. And how did you find, if you will, the corporate culture? And I know you work for multiple financial services companies regarding ethics, values, and what we might say doing the right thing.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, it took the financial crisis for a lot of these firms to really take the initiative to, lay that ethical foundation within the firm, right? Because there are many times in the past where the actions of my former colleague were just swept under the rug. And so what happens is you get a domino effect, and then you come up with scandals, and then all of these ethical, preventative measures that these companies are now enforcing is just a result of, poor ethical practice. What should happen is it should be kind of implemented into the culture and ingrained into the culture so those things don't happen. My last employer, I didn't run into as many ethical dilemmas, but they were still there. And it really comes down to just the ethical culture that's ingrained by senior management.
Okay. And do you think senior management generally do a good job at that?
I've seen progress. I mean, I've been in the work industry for 8 years now, and I've seen gradual process from each employer.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, anytime when you're in a business where your compensation is tied to, what you're selling, you're going to run into ethical dilemmas, especially when you're dealing with a client that isn't as well versed as the individual selling the products.
Good. Let's have at least one question here from the audience. Yes, in the back.
Sorry, kind of on the same vein, but there was a dude at Goldman Sachs who kind of quit recently and sort of said the same thing. I was wondering, were you saying an industry-wide kind of thing, or just more of certain firms or certain individuals? Or?
It's, I would say it's industry-wide, right? Because you think about Goldman Sachs, they're competing with Morgan Stanley, they're competing with JP Morgan. They're all smart shops, right? So, and they're all targeting the same clients. So, essentially, certain firms, I'm not going to just assume that all firms are the same, but certain firms will do certain things in order to make the sale, in order to, meet the analyst expectations, in order to hit the bottom line, in order to be the number one in, investment banking fees in the league tables. So, like I said, it's an industry-wide culture, right? So I wouldn't say the analysts or the employees at Goldman Sachs are any worse than any other shop. It's just, like I said, just an underlying foundation that's in the industry. But like I said, it is improving. Mm-hmm.
Another question? Yes, Jessica.
I'm wondering, a couple of you mentioned having mentors or others you trusted as support systems and being able to voice your concerns. Can you talk about maybe what helped you get the confidence, how to encourage you, like an emerging business leader, to find enablers or ways to feel more confident about making their business?
Yeah.
I would just say one of the important things when you start working is just starting right off the bat to build relationships. I don't think, some firms have formal mentorship programs, and sometimes it just happens naturally or it's just organic, where you meet someone and you have a good working relationship or you just click. So that's really how I found mine. I was forced into a mentorship, a partnership with somebody, and that didn't really work. But I met mine just through meeting people in the office. I was lucky enough to be part of a sort of an early career program where we had exposure to meeting different people, so that was helpful as well. So I would say just start building relationships from day one, because you never know who you're going to really click with, and if you do find that you think you could have a good relationship with somebody, just do the things like have lunch with them, or just see if you can talk to them and continue to build that relationship, because that really helped me feel comfortable in going to them when I had issues.
I would say, on building on Natalie's point, I think it's really important to, when you're looking for your first job out of college, to find a company that has a culture that suits you or that you mesh well with, because I think that really helps. I mean, not everyone can go to a company and find someone they can trust, but if you find the right company, you take your time and do your research, you can essentially pick the right place to work.
Don't be afraid to ask questions in job interviews, right, about corporate values and ethics. Mike, you mentioned you faced more early on. Do you think that you said it had part to do with your confidence, but maybe in following up on the question there, were there people that you were able to consult with and things really didn't escalate to being a big problem because you had some sounding boards within the organization?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think I was also involved in a formal mentorship program, so that was definitely helpful. But I think what was more helpful was just the culture of the firm I worked at was, it was an ethical culture, and you could approach people with ethical conflicts and ethical dilemmas. What made it a little bit more challenging for me was I was constantly, moving to different clients and working with different people in the firm, so it was tough. It took a while to really build those relationships with your coworkers because you're always working with different people and working for different managers. But after a while, as I say, it gets easier once you do gain more confidence and start to build those relationships as you progress through your career.
Okay, good. Final question? Well, please join me. Yes, in the middle there.
So each of you talked about kind of like an anecdote from some element of some contract or some audit or something that you had to do. If the issue was that you were supposed to call out like a certain executive officer or someone higher up or that behavior, how do you think you would have done acted? How do you think you would have acted in that situation? Because I think there's a different gravity attached to acting ethically in your own scope of work versus kind of challenging the way someone higher up works.
Well, in my particular situation, the partner that I was working with, he wasn't my supervisor, but just in terms of the organizational hierarchy, he was higher than I was, right? So we were both in middle management, but he was above me. And so just in terms of, taking it to senior management, I didn't think twice about it, right? Because ultimately, it's really about the client. So if we're deceiving this client or selling her something that's inappropriate, that's going to damage the reputation of the firm and then my reputation in that industry. So I wasn't concerned about any type of backlash or any type of whistleblowing because it was just the appropriate thing to do. And ultimately, I think the managing partner respected me more because I did speak up.
So would you say it's generally accepted for people to kind of skirt issues then because you said that they respected you more for doing the right thing? So would he really respect you less if you did it?
Maybe while they're thinking, I'll try this on, because I think to your question, this is exactly why most medium and large corporations have hotlines or anonymous reporting to allow the junior person to ask the question and not put themselves at risk, as you're indicating. But we've had a number of speakers here over the years who say, we need that as both managers and as an institution to allow people to come forward. And I'm not sure whether any of our panelists worked in those larger firms, but I think that's one of the ways. And also you need to signal to employees to bring things forward. You can have a hotline or cool line and say, don't ever call it or you're putting yourself at risk. But my understanding and experience with many corporations is that they want people to come forward because obviously they're in larger companies, there are thousands of people and there's bound to be a little bit of problem areas. I don't know if any of you guys want to follow up on that?
I was just going to say from a human resources perspective that the ethics hotline at the Fortune 500 firm that I worked for fed to HR, and if I wasn't comfortable with something that I saw an executive doing at Aon, I would probably call them if I was outside of HR, or if it was within HR, I would try to go to somebody anonymously. So that was a way to do it, and we took those calls really seriously. And each one was dealt with, I know, on an individual case-by-case basis.
In my situation, so even there was another, not necessarily a major ethical issue, but I guess you could say it was. The hotel I worked at, the owner, or the owner's daughter, who also ran the hotel, wanted to sell products in the spa that were expired already. And I didn't work directly for her. She was a lot higher up than me, but we didn't have a hotline or anything that we could call and report about what was going on. And I think in that case, you just have to communicate clearly and, I don't want to say walk on thin ice, but just make them realize that they usually have their blinders on and all they can think about is making revenue and making profits. And sometimes you have to kind of get them to think outside the box and let them know this could hurt your reputation, which essentially is worth more or is more valuable than a sale. So essentially what I'm trying to say is it's all about communication. It's not necessarily about having a hotline or anything. I mean, that's great if your company does have that, but not all companies do, so.
And just to tie that back to the earlier question, having a mentor or somebody in an organization you can talk to offline to help you through some of those dilemmas, especially if it's a smaller organization. Please join me in a hearty round of applause for our panelists who did an excellent job. So we'll now turn our attention to the Hesburgh Award, and before we have the formal discussion nomination of 3M, I ask my colleague, Father Ollie Williams, to come forward and introduce somebody who really needs no introduction around Notre Dame, but not everybody's been here as long as us, right, Ollie?
Who's counting? I have probably the easiest job this afternoon, and that is to tell you a little bit about how this award got its name, and then to introduce the person after whom we've named the award. Some years ago, we decided that in the Mendoza College of Business, we ought to have an award for a business leader who has demonstrated outstanding ethical conduct. And so there were a number of names put forward, and as you may imagine, Notre Dame Business School has a large number of business leaders. And we wanted a person, first of all, who demonstrated unusual competence in managing. We wanted a person who was a great entrepreneur, and we wanted a person who demonstrated ethical conduct. And after some lengthy discussion, somebody suggested, what about Father Ted Hesburgh? And of course, as a good friend of Father Ted's, I felt I should recuse myself, but there was no doubt that that was the one the committee wanted to nominate, and so we named it the Father Hesburgh Award for Business Ethics. Just a couple words about Father Hesburgh. He told me on the way in, don't make it too long, and I've learned to listen to him over the years. Father Hesburgh had the longest tenure as president in the history of the university. He came in 1952 and left in 1987. That's 35 years. Just to give you some idea of what a great entrepreneur he was and is, when he came in 1952, the annual budget was $9.7 million. Today, just to give you an idea, it's over $1 billion. When he came in 1952, the endowment was $9 million, and today it's somewhere over $7 billion. The enrollment was somewhere around 5,000 students, and today, when he left in '87, it was 10,000. I think it's about 12,000 today. He has a string of awards, which I will not bore you with, but I'll give you a couple. He, first of all, served on the United States Civil Rights Commission, appointed in 1957, served for 15 years, and was chairman of the Civil Rights Commission for a while. He's in the Guinness Book of Records for holding more honorary degrees, I believe over 150 honorary degrees. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964, and the Congressional Gold Medal in 1999, and was on the Knight Commission for Athletics, and again, the list goes on and on. But so without further ado, we're going to ask Father Ted to come forward and present the award.
Okay, I'd like to call Patrick McNamara, a native of Chicago, to come to the podium here in a minute. He's a graduate of Baker University, and prior to joining the Notre Dame MBA program, he worked in sports marketing, and he's finishing his MBA this semester and has accepted a job with Sara Lee Corporation in brand management. Will be starting work there this summer. my students in a marketing ethics class nominated a number of excellent companies for this award, but Pat was the nominator for 3M, and he's going to give us a little background on why he thinks they're such an exemplary company, and then we'll have a few photos with Father Ted. Pat?
Thanks, Professor Murphy. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today to introduce the 2012 recipient of the Father Hesburgh Award for sustained contributions to social, ethical, and environmental business practice. And we've talked about it already, but the award is presented by Notre Dame Center for Religious Values in Business and the Institute for Ethical Business Worldwide. And the 2012 recipient of this award is the 3M Company, which I nominated. With us today is Executive Chairman of the Board, Sir George William Buckley, who will be joining us on stage a little bit later. As you said, my name is Patrick McNamara. I am a second-year student here in the Mendoza College of Business MBA program. And I am a longtime user of the many innovative 3M products that we've come to know, like Scotch tape and Post-it notes. I thought I'd try to be clever and write my speech on these Post-it notes today, but it has turned into not a very efficient idea, so I reverted to regular paper. We all know 3M as its consumer products that we pick up in the store on a daily basis, but it's actually known quite a bit for its business-to-business solutions as well. Like many award ceremonies, I thought of using kind of my short time here to outline some of the reasons why I nominated 3M for this great award. It's really easy to list the accomplishments that 3M's had over the years relating to ethics, corporate social responsibility, sustainability, philanthropy. The list really does go on and on for them. This includes some distinctions, such as being named one of America's greenest companies by Newsweek, receiving a record-setting 7th straight Energy Star Distinction Award from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and being ranked #2 on Interbrand's Global Best Green Brands list. And all of those awards are actually just from 2011, so they have a great history of these. There's no question that the list of awards and distinctions is extensive and exemplary, with the impact being recorded in cities and countries across the globe. And while 3M grew to become one of the largest multinational companies, they have remained a longtime supporter of philanthropic causes and community needs in their home city of Minneapolis in the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. But when I was kind of looking to nominate a company for this award, it really wasn't some of these public distinctions or some of the really visually stimulating and awesome graphic, sustainability reports you can find on their website. I was really looking to nominate a company that didn't just publicly say they ran their business with ethics in mind, or find a company that had created a new corporate social responsibility program when the market and public told them that it was the right thing to do. I wanted to find a company that had always done business the right way and had that philosophy really embedded in the fabric of the organization. While many companies are now adopting policies on how their business affects the environment, 3M had instituted their policy known as 3P, or Pollution Prevention Pays, all the way back in 1975, a long time ago compared to what a lot of companies are now just adopting. And as companies are now en masse determining better ways that they can actually develop products with focus on the environment and health and safety in other areas, 3M instituted their product lifecycle management system in 1997, so nearly 15 years ago, with an early theme called Sustainability Shouldn't Have an Expiration Date. So 3M is really a company that has run their business with this philosophy long before awards and sustainability ratings even existed. And they've successfully spread this culture of ethics across the firm's 80,000 employees in 65 countries. And while 3M is known for its commitment to the environment and being a leader in how the company internally operates in an environmentally sustainable way, it has also truly made a global impact as a socially responsible company. This can be seen in a number of ways, but one thing I'll talk about is their global partnership with the Nature Conservancy, in which over $10 million a year has been donated to help protect the environment, and as they say in their own value statement, respect the social and physical environment around the world. This partnership includes such items as donating money and resources in China to a program that helps preserve migratory routes for birds and wildlife, a grant program in Brazil that preserves precious acreage of the rainforest in which plants and animals reside, or even in its home state of Minnesota by working with the Forest Legacy Partnership, which is a group that helps create and maintain jobs in the forest industry in the upper Mississippi River Basin. And 3M has also empowered its own employees to make a difference by giving them the opportunity to match charitable contributions as well as bring important opportunities back to the organization. Last year alone, over $58 million in cash and in-kind contributions was distributed to different nonprofit groups relating to the arts, community, environment, health, human services, higher education, and K-12 education throughout the world. They're a company that truly provides personalized support to its employees and to the greater community. So the more I learned about 3M and the deep-rooted commitment to these factors of business, I thought it wouldn't do the company and Mr. Buckley's justice to really just rattle off accomplishments, as I said earlier. Though looking back when I was writing this speech, I realized I pretty much just did that. And while I think that the very simple 178-page 2011 sustainability report is fascinating and everybody should read it, I didn't think it'd be very green of me to print that off for everyone in attendance. And really, the sustainability report is kind of the cornerstone of a lot of this, but they have over 25 internal public reports on their website that really talk about the policies and the actions that they as a company live by on a day-to-day basis. Ultimately, 3M is a company that is and has been a leader in the way that they do business. And we as students here at Notre Dame, we've kind of been constantly ingrained with the phrase, ask more of business. And 3M is really a company that has been asking more of business for a long time and answering those questions with great success. So it is my honor to introduce the 2012 award winner for the Hesburgh Award for sustained contributions to social, ethical, and environmental business practices of 3M Company. And here accepting this award today is Executive Chairman of the Board of 3M, Sir George William Buckley. Sir George Buckley was named the Executive Chairman of 3M in February 2012 after having served as the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer since December of 2005. Prior to 3M, he served as the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Brunswick Corporation, as well as the President of the U.S. Electric Motors Division at Emerson Electric Company. And in 2011, he was honored by the Queen of England by being knighted at the birthday honors ceremony for his services and contributions to industry and education. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Sir George William Buckley of 3M.
Well, thank you very much, Pat, for that introduction. It's very kind of you, and I'm very glad to have a chance to participate in this event. And it's one of the great surprises to corporations sometimes when you try to do what's right, and ultimately people do actually recognize it. You sometimes don't think they're going to, but it's so wonderful to receive this award. We're very, very much appreciative. I thought before I sort of get into the body of what I wanted to say was I would just tell you briefly a little bit about 3M. 3M is a sort of a company that people know about for these kind of products, but it's a company that originally was founded in the abrasives field. It is today the largest abrasives company in the world. It is the company that invented the heart-lung machine, the cochlear implant, developed all the surgical techniques for corneal and lenticular transplants. It invented the industry for hip replacements, for knee replacements. It even made Neil Armstrong's boots for the moonshot on Apollo 11. I think it was probably the greatest single marketing failure of all time that we didn't have the 3M logo on the bottom of Neil Armstrong's boots, so that famous photograph didn't have 3M on it. In terms of who we are and what we do, we are located in Minnesota. In fact, the 3M name stands for Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, as it originally was. We were originally more a mining company than anything else, and that's obviously where the abrasives came from. We have registered subsidiaries in about 70 different countries. We manufacture in 44 different countries. We have 210 manufacturing plants. We employ around 8,000 or 9,000 PhDs, scientists in developing products. And we make, would you believe, about 85,000 individual unique products in so many diverse marketplaces. So, for example, we are the largest abrasives company I mentioned. We're the largest adhesive and adhesive tape manufacturer in the world. The second largest dental company in the world. So we make, if you've got a crown or a bridge in your mouth, you're about 50% probability it's a 3M bridge or crown. Largest orthodontics company in the world, largest hospital supply company in the world. And in any one day, I'll be in a business meeting involving maybe Post-it notes. And by the way, we do make bigger Post-it notes, Pat, wherever you went. Maybe we'll send you some for the next award recipient. So it's a company that, you know, one day I'm speaking about an adhesive and composites for airplane wings, and the next conversation is about perhaps a supply issue with Walmart. The next meeting is a discussion about diapers, baby diapers, believe it or not, and so it goes on and on and on. So it's a quite wonderful company. And last year on our shareholders meeting, I wrote a line in there which I truly believe to be the case. Is a company you could never imagine if it didn't exist today. It really is an utterly fine company. It's the 21st largest company in America by market capitalization. So, and it's the largest profitability by margin, by profit margin, of any industrial manufacturing company in the world. And yet it does all this through science, through ethical behavior, and it is just a quite remarkable and pretty much unique company. So that's the company I work for, and the company I've led for the last roughly 7 years. So I'm going to start my remarks here in a more formal way, and hopefully you'll find some gems to take away. I will tell you that half of my remarks here I originally wrote for a speech I was asked to give at St. Thomas University, another great Catholic university in Minnesota, a wonderful place, led by wonderful people I have great affection for. But I was asked to talk about this topic of ethics and morality. And you know, the topics of ethic and morality, which you are in some ways studying right now, let me tell you, from my perspective, it's sort of dry as old sticks. It's, you know, something you try to breathe some life into. So one thing that I tried to do when I spoke at St. Thomas about this matter was you have to have a little humor. Sometimes sensitive topics can be delivered with humor. Sometimes really dry topics can be delivered with a little bit of humor. So hopefully we've got a little bit of that in here. I didn't have time, regrettably, to do it all, but hopefully you'll like some of the things that we thought about. So as Patrick made clear, it's 3M is a company where corporate ethics are embedded in the culture, much like innovation is for us, and creativity are also embedded. In fact, 3M's value-based culture was one of the most important factors in me joining the company nearly 7 years ago, and I can absolutely tell you that 3M did not disappoint me. Now, I'm not a philosopher, and I'm not a moralizer, but I was asked to share with you a few of my observations on ethics and morals from my own rule book of life. I've titled my talk here, There But for the Grace of God, Go We. You know, on the day that you pass from this life, you'll have established a reputation over that lifetime by how well you demonstrated your ethics and moral values. There's no question that you'll have made some mistakes along the way, maybe even some pretty big ones, as we all do. But hopefully your interview with Almighty God on Judgment Day won't be too long or too arduous, and He won't ask you too many awkward questions. I'm certainly hoping that in my case. I think it'll be a short one, but I'm hoping it's a short one and I go to the good place, not the other place. But on that day, you know, it won't matter if you've made $100 million in your lifetime or made $10,000. Nobody's going to care about that detail on that day, but they will care about your ethics and moral conduct. That's the real legacy that you'll leave behind on that day, And that's why it's an important subject for you to think about today as you go forward in your careers in this particular arena. And you know, we've all seen far too many examples of people getting themselves into various kinds of trouble and ethical dilemmas. And if you look at the sad case not that long ago of Tiger Woods or Elliot Spitzer, Dennis Kozlowski of Enron, of Tyco, Bernie Madoff or Ken Lay of Enron, and certainly none of those people are examples that we'd want to emulate. Now, what we don't know is how much good things these people did in their lives, and there were probably quite a lot, because it's all been really overshadowed by the bad choices that they made along the way. And nobody's speaking about the good things they did simply because they're too busy and too perhaps engaged in thinking about the bad and the scandalous. The lives of these people are really now defined by their mistakes and not by their successes and all the sniggering that goes along with it. And you know, ethics and moral values are a little bit like gravity. If you don't work hard to keep them up, they're almost certainly going to take you down. And I want to say here at this particular juncture, as a matter of principle, I don't think it's wise. I think it's very unwise for us to sit in judgment of other people who've made mistakes, because the fact is that we've all made mistakes, and we'll probably make a few more before we're done. And you never know how grave the next mistake is going to be, the one just around the corner that you don't know about. So as I said, it's best to think, I think in this context, there but for the grace of God go we. What's that common saying you hear all the time? You know, the man who never made a mistake never made anything. But on the other hand, it's always better to learn from somebody else's mistakes than your own. We're all under temptation, and whether you're a fairly religious man like myself, and perhaps you blame the devil for the temptation, or if you're a non-religious person and you blame human frailties, really the traps that catch us out are still the same, whatever is our persuasion. We all like to feel that we'll be the exception to the rule, that it won't go wrong for us, that we can handle it. But in reality, that slippery slope of poor ethics and weak moral values is not what one should want to be voluntarily riding on, or maybe should I say sliding on. I've often asked Almighty God to protect me from making those and many other kinds of mistakes in my life, and to keep me away from the trips and traps that are so easy to fall into, even for the wise and wary. Best we know about the more obvious ones so we can avoid them if we can. First question really to ponder is, how does it happen? Is there any common theme that we can identify when it does? And you know, I recall giving a speech just shortly after the famous accounting firm Arthur Andersen got itself into difficulty over Enron. I was asked a question by a member of the audience. He said, George, how did they, speaking about Arthur Andersen, get themselves into so much trouble? I think people expected me to give a long and erudite answer, but instead I gave them a short, one-word answer that I think was far more accurate than any long one I could have dreamed up. I said the answer is slowly. And that is exactly how most of us, when we get into trouble, we get ourselves into trouble slowly. We allow ourselves to compromise on what we often know to be wrong and begin a slow slide down a slippery slope of deteriorating values. At the bottom of that slope is a figurative pit of vipers that can destroy our reputation and perhaps even our lives if we're not careful, just as surely as any poisonous snake could. And because it happens so slowly, it's one of the most dangerous and hardest slopes to detect and to avoid. In companies, you see this kind of problem crop up most often where corporate policies and procedures are weak. Somebody does something, they test the boundary, and the alarm bell doesn't ring. So a little bit later, they test it again, maybe a little bit further out this time, and the bells don't ring again either. And pretty soon, after a few tests, that same somebody is way out on the edge of what's sensible. And then the ending becomes very predictable, and it's never a happy ending. These offenses are nearly always caught out or identified at some time in the future. I will tell you that. Maybe they aren't, but it seems to me that they are. But even if they're not, this is not a place any of us here today should want to go. So how do we avoid it? Now, if you don't mind the dark humor here, it's said by those who know, and I'm not one of them, that the figurative first murder is always the hardest. But to translate, as crimes or slips in standards occur for us as individuals, the next slip always becomes a little bit easier. And pretty soon a pattern of behavior has been established, and it's taken us to a place that we don't want to be. And so often, the final, unhappy ending is not even on the topic of the first slip. It can be in an area completely unrelated and perhaps even more serious than the place we started. And so clearly the best way to avoid that kind of unhappy ending is not to get started in the first place. And sometimes the biggest mistake for which the worst punishment is administered is the cover-up. If you remember Richard Nixon and Watergate, Bill Clinton and his troubles. So I think the lesson here is very simple. If you made a mistake, and we all do, fess up immediately, apologize, promise never to do it again, and make sure you keep that promise. If you're in a hole and trying to get out, you know the old rule, the best thing to first thing to do is to stop digging. And to combat that problem, we have to have a firm vision of what constitutes good and bad. While the reality of good and bad are relative judgments, I think we all know what I mean here. I mean, would I be proud for my grandmother to know I did this or thought that? And I will tell you that I sometimes wonder which interview I fear the most when I die, that with the Almighty or that with my grandmother. So that's my personal perspective, and not surprisingly, it's also 3M's corporate perspective. You can't check your ethics at the door when you come to the office. But ethics means much more than just staying out of trouble. It also means doing the right things. For example, take 3M's approach to sustainability. Sustainability is a big part of who we are as a company, and of course, there are many elements that define 3M. Certainly at the top of that list are innovation, as you all well know, and certainly among those are profitability and growth. But if we execute well as we advance sustainability, those three elements, innovation, profitability and growth, can also increase too. And that's good for the company, it's good for our customers, and indeed it's good for all of us. 3M has demonstrated it's possible to be pro-growth, pro-profits, and pro-sustainability at the same time. I think we've shown that we can manage our environmental issues responsibly, even as our business has grown in sales, profits, and global reach. We've demonstrated that we can set and attain tough environmental goals for ourselves, and in contrast to popular newspaper views, we don't use different standards in Mexico or China to the ones we use in Wisconsin. Managing our environmental footprint remains a core responsibility, and if you look at the way 3M does it and what it's done, I think we're managing it very well. Let me just give you quickly a few examples. As Pat said, we've been setting and achieving environmental goals since 1975, 1980, long before it was fashionable for corporations to do so, and probably before 95% of you in the audience here were born. And over that time, we've reduced VOC emissions by 98% and waste by 68% when it's indexed to net sales. We use around 25% of the energy per pound today that we did 35 years ago. In 2010, we broadened the base of targets beyond environmental and set sustainability goals for the first time. The goals include social responsibility and economic objectives, but the environment is still the predominant factor, as we intend to reduce VOC emissions by another 15% by 2015, reduce solid waste by 10%, and improve energy efficiency by another 25%, all from that spectacular 2010 base. As Pat said, the fundamental building block to this approach is what we call the 3P program, Preventing Pollution Pays. And it's now in its 32nd year and still advancing. 32nd year. Over the years, this innovative world-leading program has prevented 3.5 billion pounds of pollution from 9,300 separate employee-led team projects. These projects have made over $1.6 billion in savings. Yes, $1.6 billion. And you know that old adage, a billion here and a billion there, and pretty soon you have real money? Well, how's that for making sustainability and environmental projects pay? Our energy conservation efforts have received the US Department of Energy star now for 8 years, by the way, Pat. 8 consecutive years, the only company in the world to do. I think the longest run of any other company was 5 years. And we do it with inventions we make and in the way that we make those products based upon them. That doesn't speak to a flash in the pan, but a steady and committed approach to energy reduction. And no matter what your feelings about the politically charged topic of global warming, whether you're on one side of the divide or the other, it's never going to be good to pollute or waste the Earth's resources. We work at reducing our packaging material footprint. You know, we're in the business of making things, and you see packaging, and you see these many sort of what I think are abusive approaches. You see a little sort of teeny-weeny thing here in a blister pack that's this big. It's just a waste. So we try to make sure that we reduce that for our customers. We make many of the plastics that we use, we make them compostable. And every single one of these claims, like compostability, is lab proven. No marketing speak in this particular situation. If we say it's lab proven, it is lab proven. But I'll also be straightforward and maybe even disappoint you here by telling you that you can't make a single extra red cent on making products that are more environmentally friendly. Nobody would pay for it, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. 7 years ago, when I came to 3M in our optical film production, which is the most difficult manufacturing challenge I've ever seen in my life, these are things that make the optics of your iPhone and your iPad and your flat screen TV work. They're all made by 3M. We essentially cycled nothing. Today, we recycle or reuse all the offline waste that we produce in that process, either in the core process itself or in making other plastic parts like, say, a Scotch tape cores from the waste. And this is really good for 3M because it's reduced our material costs in those businesses by about 50% over what it was 7 years ago. I mean, it's a huge reduction. When you're trying to be competitive in the world economy, this is very important. So achievements like this don't really result from serendipity. They're a result of hard work, of investment, of commitment, and commitment that transcends CEOs, vice presidents, managers, and even generations of employees. It's a commitment that's become part of 3M's culture and very much wedded into who we are. We expect, no, in reality we demand from our people the same standard globally for ethics, integrity, and business conduct. We expect the same environmental standards for our company wherever we do business, and we've done so for many, many years. Our technology and culture have helped 3M to succeed commercially everywhere on the planet, and while I expect to get a few things wrong here and there, we are true believers in the church of human decency and integrity. Our technology and our culture, combined with commitment and resolve, are helping 3M succeed in sustainability everywhere on the planet. And just in closing, as I go through life, I find that few people want to do anything other than the right thing. And the same is true of major companies. But the reality is that we all make our mistakes, and I certainly made my share, and maybe even more than my share. We'll have to see when the big guy in the sky decides later. But we should try always to keep our moral and ethical values intact. It's absolutely vital. And after all, we want our friends and loved ones on that day to remember as well. So as I said, there but for the grace of God go we. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. You're very kind. Thank you. God bless to all of you.
We have time for a couple questions, please.
Anything you like. It doesn't matter. Strategy, business, ethics, morals, money, whatever you like. Technology.
George, 3M is well known for its, 15% of the
Yes.
time that people are supposed to spend thinking. I assume that's still
It is indeed.
in operation.
Yeah, this, what Patrick's speaking about is one of the things that we do to encourage entrepreneurship in the company is we give our employees in the R&D departments and the innovation areas, we give them 15% of their time free. They can do what they want to invent products that they like, and we have a system of what we call Genesis grants up to $50,000 so they can buy equipment, hire a consultant, run experiments in pilot lines to test out their ideas. And it's just a quite marvelous place where there's this sort of giant anthill all sort of collaborating together in these sorts of missions. And it's a wonderful place where it seems that just about everybody seems to want to help everybody else. It's really just quite remarkable. It's the only place in my entire working career that I've seen that's like it. So sign up quickly would be my recommendation to you. But it's a wonderful place to do innovation, and certainly these ethical things that I spoke about are all absolutely rock solid. So you're not curious about 3M at all? So which is the brave one in the crowd here? Ah, we have one brave soul here.
You answered about how did Arthur Andersen get there, and the answer was slowly. I wonder if you could speak to it. It seems like 3M is a corporation that's had an ethical culture for a long time, and if you could speak to kind of the difference between sustaining
Well, perhaps the answer I would give you is people watch your feet, not your mouth. In a short, they watch what you do. If I try to promote ethical and moral behavior and don't do so myself, in the end it just completely destroys the argument. And you'd be amazed, I actually jokingly said one time that there are more people watching me at 3M than there are members of the FBI watching the Russians. But it's absolutely true, and it's actually maybe a lot easier than you might think. But there's tremendous peer pressure in the company to behave in this way. We have policies that we absolutely rigorously enforce, and if you're engaged in some kind of unethical behavior, we will fire you. I mean, we try to be fair. Don't get me wrong. We're not. It's not some sort of a terrible organization. But in the end, if those things are important to you, you have to act accordingly. But thank you for the question. Anybody else? Sir, Father?
As a teacher of business ethics, I've always admired 3M for ethics and sustainability. I'm also a board member of the United Nations Global Compact. I'm surprised that 3M, being the leader that it is in this field, is not a member.
Well, I don't know that was necessarily a conscious choice, because you can be members of lots of different clubs, and we could do almost nothing but that. I don't think there's a conscious choice on that. And 3M is a very quiet and unassuming company that goes about its way. It rarely sort of beats any drums about itself. I was invited here to talk about that issue, and so it's the classic sort of Minnesota Midwestern approach, modesty, and we don't have to say anything about it. Let our actions prove what we do. So there must be some person in the room that's curious about, say, the next generation of this device. Say, no? What's out there in the great blue yonder that we're working on that might be in your pocket next year? Not even interested in that, you guys, are you? We provoked somebody. What keeps me up at night? The question is, should I answer this question completely honestly, or should I give you a politically correct answer? The answer is the United States government. That's the honest answer. And it's anti-competitive, anti-business practices. That's when we're in Minnesota, trying to figure out a way to compete against the very best companies, up and coming, some mature, some not, in the world. Let me tell you, you need every bit of help you can. In competition, there's a gigantic Darwinian struggle taking place, and unfortunately, the winner gets to have my job. If I'm the winner, I get to keep it. If I'm not, I get to lose it. And we're increasingly creating a difficult business environment for American companies to compete in, and as a consequence, many companies are leaving. Many companies are choosing to do business elsewhere, and it's very sad that we don't have the government on our side. But it is what it is. People like me are demonized. I'm clearly, two-headed. I've got little horns hidden under my, thinning hair here somewhere, and I have my tail safely tucked down my pants. And actually, this is not really my face. It's a Halloween mask. I have a red skin underneath, So, and it's just not true. It's not just about me, but I find in business, so many of the people that I meet, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I'm from a very poor family. I was raised by foster parents, raised in a rooming house. I went to a school for physically handicapped children, and when I came to this country in 1974, I wasn't as bad off as some people. I actually owned $13,000, which was the equity from my house. And the wonderful thing about America is it allows you to enter the bottom, and by a process of hard work and application, inspiration, help, luck, divine intervention maybe, you can climb up the system. And we must not dismantle that system. We must try to encourage it because it's the spirit that made America great in my view.
Good thought, good thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.